Hello, hello. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this important discussion on voting with purpose, insights for the reproductive justice voter. My name is Regina Davis Moss, and I'm honored to serve as the president and CEO of In Our Own Voice National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda. Today, we're gathered to really dig deep into critical and often overlooked aspects of political engagement, which is evaluating the history, the voting history, the platforms, the Democratic candidates through the lens of reproductive justice. Now, it's easy to assume that candidates with a D next to their names automatically align with our values and priorities. However, reproductive justice demands a more nuanced approach. It's not enough for a candidate to simply support access to reproductive health services. Reproductive justice encompasses a broad spectrum of issues, including things like economic justice, racial justice, improving the environment, expanding healthcare, access to childcare and paid leave, and also the right to parent or not parent your child in a safe and sustainable community. Basically, reproductive justice is anything that supports our ability to live in sustainable and thriving communities. And anything like that is a win for Black women. And whenever Black women win, our communities are transformed and it has far reaching impacts on our families and communities. So, our goals today is really just to equip you with the knowledge and tools so that you can critically assess candidates. We need to look beyond these party affiliations and really scrutinize the records and the platforms. Ask questions like, are they truly advocating for policies that support the full spectrum of reproductive justice? Are they addressing systemic issues? Are they addressing inequalities that disproportionately affect Black women and other marginalized communities? We're going to explore all these questions. We're going to be digging really deep. And I am so excited about this panel. This is like off. I can't even contain myself. They're going to be sharing their insights, their experiences, shedding light on the complexities of political advocacy in the realm of reproductive justice. And by the end of this session, I don't even need to hope. I know you're going to feel empowered. You're going to engage in political process with a clear understanding of what it means to be a reproductive justice voter. So thank you again for being here, for your commitment to making informed and impactful choices at the ballot box. Thank you for spending your lunch with me or even your breakfast with me. Now let's meet our panelists who will guide us through this vital conversation. All right. So why don't we just start by Beulah. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Thank you, Regina. So my name is Beulah Osweke, pronoun she, her. I'm the executive director at New Voices for Reproductive Justice. We are based in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and we work to build power for and alongside Black women, Black queer folks, and Black marginalized people. So when we talk about Black marginalized people, we're talking about sex workers, solo parents, formerly incarcerated people. And we are very committed to Black liberation and making sure that Black people are well.
Cicely.
Good afternoon. Now, my name is Cicely Allen. So, when I think about who I am, I automatically kind of go into the roles. But first, I'm a Black woman, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a member of a community, of a sisterhood, and I work with the Wisdom Institute. I'm a co executive director. And the Wisdom Institute is a grassroots organization out of Detroit. We're a spirit centered, spirit led organization. We were founded by three Black women, one being our former co-executive director, Gwen Winston. And our work really centers around Black women and girls living our absolute best lives and desire for a collective community. So we approach the work with the reproductive justice lens. It's under the rubric of healing justice, using training, outreach, advocacy, and just our full authentic selves to build transformational solidarity.
And rounding us out, Brittany. Welcome.
Thanks, everyone. It's so fantastic to be with you all. I'm Brittany Pecknett Cunningham. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am a Black woman of faith who has faith in God, in my ancestors, in my people, and the power therein. I am an activist and an advocate, as well as a writer, and I'm the host and executive producer of Undistracted, a podcast from the Meteor Network. We'll be premiering our third season on September the 5th of this year, right in time for some history-making times for certain. But we are an intersectional news and justice podcast that really works to ensure that we're not only speaking and teaching truth that moves people to action, but that we are doing so in a way that helps people ask better questions and become better answers. I also come to this work as someone who, as a Black woman, has absolutely needed reproductive justice in my life. I recently, well, gosh, 2.5 years ago now, became one of the disproportionate amount of Black women who give preterm birth. And that was after suffering a miscarriage. My son was born at 24 weeks at 1 pound and 9 ounces. Thankfully, he is doing incredibly well now. But I needed absolutely every resource, every right, every opportunity that has been fought for by the folks on this call. And so I am deeply grateful and also deeply committed.
Thank you so much. First, congratulations on another
Thank
season for your podcast. And also congratulations on your birth outcome. I know that wasn't, and thank you for sharing that story. Tell us where people can listen in on your podcast.
So you can listen anywhere you get your podcast. It's a great time to go and stream the first 2 seasons and catch up. We've had a number of episodes about reproductive justice. We've had folks like Renee Bracy Sherman on talking about abortion storytelling. We've had on people like Fatima Goss Graves talking about really the care economy and how we ensure that all of this is intertwined in the work that we do collectively as organizers and as advocates. So yes, wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere you like to listen to your favorite shows, please subscribe. And we can't wait to start the new season soon. Thanks for asking that.
Great. I'm looking forward to hearing it. So let's get into it. Just a little housekeeping for those tuning in. If you have questions, please be sure to chat your questions. We are going to have time for question and answer about, 30 minutes from now. So don't hold your questions, get them in there so that we can start getting them lined up. Now, we cannot begin this conversation without talking about these past few weeks. Wow. It's really hard to ignore the unprecedented happenings in politics this week. So we had the Republicans, they held their convention announcing their vice president candidate. President Biden officially stepped out of the race, endorsing VP Harris to be the Democratic nominee. Can we just go around and talk about ways in which this news about the candidates and the race gives us an opportunity to really pivot our attention to reproductive justice issues? How can we use these moments to educate about the importance of RJ issues? Beulah, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. And I'm glad we're addressing it at the top of the discussion. What seems to have shifted for people is that people seem energized with the arrival of a new promising candidate. So there will be people who feel mobilized to act based upon sharing an identity or identities with the prospective Democratic nominee. And there will be people, organizers, activists that see this as fertile ground as opposed to some of our previous choices. That's a lot of the discourse I've been hearing amongst organizers, radicals, and people who recognize the limitations of our electoral system, but also want to do whatever we can within the existing system to ensure that our communities are well. What has not shifted is our material conditions. There are still people who don't have food to eat. There are still women and femme folks that have to navigate intimate partner violence. So it doesn't matter who's at the top, whatever ticket, what can you do for me? And our organization has been really getting clear with people. Why are we're having voter apathy sessions. Why do you not want to vote? What are your hesitations? And some of the same reasons keep rising to the top. People are not clear about how that power is materializing for them. Another thing that has not shifted is our right to dictate what happens to our own bodies. That's still up in the air on a national level. What also has not changed is that the U.S. is still facilitating a number of atrocities across the globe. So what has shifted for me in the position that I am is our need and a recommitment to building power outside of these electoral systems and working in conjunction with elected officials that mean what they say, but there's still that deep need.
Brittany, how about you? What are you hearing?
Well, I think Beulah makes so many excellent points that people are really hungry for progress, right? And so the idea of a shifted ticket is at least giving people the hope that we can actually be forward looking, right? And not simply be in a state of correction all the time, which it feels like we've had to be so often following the Trump administration and following lots of other actions, following Dobbs, et cetera. And so I think that people are wanting to invest that hope in Tabula's point, more than just a candidate and more than just a party, right? That investing in that power means looking at it from every single angle, investing in community care and mutual aid, in political education, such that we understand exactly who and where and what and when people are making decisions about our lives, our bodies, and our ability to have agency and authority over them. Making sure that our folks understand that not only should they be paying attention to the entire ballot, they should be creatively thinking about how they influence that ballot if one day they want to put their names on that ballot, and how they want to work for the people on those ballots who are in line with our collective principles. I also think from a media perspective, though, especially if we look specifically at that top slot, there has not been a lot of coverage, mainstream coverage of a lot of the conversations that Vice President Harris has been intentional to have around reproductive justice and reproductive rights and access. We know that some of this is due to misogynoir, that folks are more interested in what the old white guys have to say than what we have to say. And I say this as somebody who is a former head of social impact for BET Networks, actually helped produce a special with Aaron Haynes, Vice President Harris, and actress DeWanda Wise ahead of the 2022 midterms around reproductive justice. And knowing that the pickup for that was great in some places and not in other places, right? So what has shifted from a media landscape is that now everyone is hanging on every single word that Vice President Harris is saying, because there's renewed interest in her platform. There's renewed interest in seeing how her platform will differ from President Biden's and what she's willing to move forward on that he might not have been, including things that are happening globally and domestically outside of reproductive justice issues. But most certainly, reproductive justice has been a central part of her platform and her campaign talking points. And so there will be many, many more cameras and microphones in the room when she talks about this now, when she talks about maternal mortality, when she talks about infant mortality. And most certainly, there is lots of organizing to do at the grassroots level beyond a single candidate or a single party or a single election. And yet and still, we know that there will be more conversation in the media. And I think Black people in particular want to make sure that we are central to that conversation, especially as the creators of the concept and framework of reproductive justice versus just reproductive rights, and wanting to make sure that we're not left out of that conversation as we so often are.
Yes, plus one to all of that. I would have to just give out a shout out to VP Harris. First of all, I'm a bison, so we share that. But she actually named reproductive justice at a event at Howard, and so I've always wanted to give her flowers for naming reproductive justice and really leaning into that. So, and I'm very excited about how she's going to champion this issue. Cicely, tell me this: what is reproductive justice to you? And how can we use these moments to educate about the importance of RJ issues?
I mean, when I think about reproductive justice, it's a way in order for us to get human rights, which are things that we all need, access to things that we all need to live our best lives, to all thrive. It does center us as Black women. And we know that when Black women have the proper conditions, than everybody else does, because we're at the bottom of every index to measure the quality of life. And so when we are in these positions with campaigns and the attention that is coming forth, the opportunities that are coming forth, we have to seize the moment, right? We have to lean in. And to Beulah's point, and Brittany, a lot of folks are going to get energized, right? Because of all this new opportunity, the new folks that are stepping up to be candidates. But then we have to be careful. We have this opportunity to bring people into the movement, to educate them about reproductive justice, to make it meaningful for them and see how they're connected to the work. But it can't be a one and done. It can't be once we have this win, like we saw with Barack Obama, we don't return to the polls. We have to continue to engage our communities, on a consistent basis and deepen these relationships and grow together and learn together about what reproductive justice is and how it can potentially transform our lives.
Thank you. And so when we want those people to go to the polls, we want them to really be able to assess the voting history and the platforms of candidates to make sure that they're really aligning with the RJ values. What are some ways we can do that, Brittany?
I think one of the ways that we can do that is making sure that we are helping provide people with specific targeted information, right? I think that the work that Beulah and Cicely do is so important because state-based work really matters, right? The issue of reproductive justice looks different in Maryland, where I live, and different in Missouri, where I'm from. And if I am giving people kind of blatant statements on my podcast, then I'm engaging in malpractice, right? I'm not doing the work that is necessary and setting people up to be empowered right where they are, to fight for what they deserve and receive what they deserve. So I think the first thing is that we can be targeted and specific in our outreach. The second thing I think we have to do is be intentional to be inclusive. I'm in so many spaces where people talk about reproductive justice only in the context of cisgender women. And we know that reproductive justice is as much an issue for our queer and trans siblings as it is for people like myself who are cisgender women. It is as much an issue for disabled people as it is for temporarily able-bodied people, right? It is just as much an issue for folks born in America as it is for immigrants. And the more that we can be expansive and intentionally inclusive in how we get out that education and information, the more people we can bring into the fold, not only as empowered voters, but as empowered people who know how to go and seek the services and support that they deserve. Lastly, I think that we have to combat misinformation. And this is the toughest one, in my opinion, of the three that I just listed, because I know that people are doing intentionally inclusive work. I know that people are doing intentionally specific work. I'm on a call with three of them. And yet this disinformation is often specifically targeted at Black communities. There's and some of it is subtle, right? Some of it is it appears as a bot or even a white conservative showing up on social media as a Black woman and speaking with authority to issues that impact me personally, right? And I have to be smart enough to look at when the account was created and how they've been tweeting or posting and kind of sift through all of these really nuanced things to see if maybe this is a fake account. And a lot of times people are not taking the time to do that. They don't have the time to do that. They don't know what to look for when they're doing that. Sometimes it comes across subtly because it's attached to some kind of real information, right? So one of the current pieces of disinformation that's out there about Vice President Harris is about her time as Attorney General in California. Enforcing rules at the time on incarcerated people who were seeking gender affirming care. Because she was working for the state of California, she had to enforce the existing policy. So she did that in court. And then what she did was actually work with the folks in charge of those institutions to change the policy, right? So we have to make sure that we're telling the entire story, not because that makes her a perfect candidate, but it is to say we want the kind of people who are going to listen to the feedback of the people and actually get creative in how they make things happen. We also have to recognize that disinformation can come in some forms that might seem really obvious to us, but are challenging for other people, right? Facebook in particular has been weaponized. Instagram has been weaponized. And there are folks who are certainly not interested in our best interests, who are taking a lot of time to push agendas that harm us. And so it's really critical for us to seek the facts, right? To get on Google and fact check things. And I literally mean asking Google, fact check, : is blah, 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 blah true, right? Like you have to get that specific to get directed to the right resources, to think about the sources that we are accepting, that if somebody puts out a video, ask them what their sources are. Where did they get their numbers? Where did they get their information? Those kinds of things really come at a one-to-one level, right? That people have to be determined to seek correct information on their own. And yet and still, it's something we absolutely have to do because we know our community is being targeted, and we're being targeted so that the world post-Dobbs gets even worse.
I'm so glad you mentioned digital media. But Beulah, I know you do quite a bit of work in this area, particularly around cultural narrative change, as well as Brittany, you as well. But how do we use media and technology to actually counteract that? How can we amplify RJ issues across campaigns and really, fight back against that disinformation? Beulah, I'll start with you, and then Brittany, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, Brittany, as you were talking, I really empathize with you because I'm not on social media, so I don't have to deal with all those bots and everything. And I'm like, they
Good for
really
you.
trying it. Right. They be trying it. But I do consume media, right? And anyone who lives in the United States of America who acts like they don't consume any type of media, I guess everybody consumes media to some extent. So I feel like I do have a background in communications. I have a background in narrative and cultural strategy. I talk with Regina about it all the time, because I do believe that meeting people where they're at is possible when we tap into the connected tissue that already holds our societies together, already holds our communities together. One of the things that I love about working at New Voices is our hyper focus on Black people. I believe in solidarity. I believe in collaborating with other people. I think that solidarity is the only way for us to achieve collective liberation. And also, I recognize when you open up conversations, when you open up practices, it is oftentimes Black people, disabled people, Indigenous people, queer and trans people that get relegated to the side and told to wait your turn. There is no turn, right? So people talk about some of the infighting on the left and all that. It's not about infighting. It's about having different experiences that inform how we show up and how we want to build with each other, not having a sense of trust, not having a sense of relationship. Because the point that many people have lifted up, we're so busy playing defense that we can't even be forward thinking and put energy towards the world that we desire. So when thinking about the world that we desire, media is big on imagination. It's always funny to me when I see a fictional story that doesn't have any Black people, doesn't have any like disabled folks. It's just like, you can think of all this, but you can't add a Negro. Sorry, Regina, sorry. So when I think about media, it's a chance for us to test and spread our messaging. I think oftentimes we tend to fixate on particular components of what we're talking about. So instead of elevating the conversation to talk about the nation's overall standard of care, right? People want to fixate on abortion or fixate on one particular aspect of a full spectrum. And I'm not just talking about the standard of care within our medical institutions. How do we care for each other in our communities? We're seeing an erosion of third spaces in society as a whole. We're seeing a privatization of spaces that used to exist just so we can connect. How are we combating that and building relationship and connection with each other? I used to coach basketball, and so I oftentimes talk about how we don't really get together to watch games anymore. A lot of people are like streaming. A lot of people are, just very individual focused. And what we're doing is robbing ourselves opportunities, communal opportunities to have conversations about what we're seeing. Using the basketball example as a reference, there is such a conversation about race and misogyny when we're comparing Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. And anyone who doesn't know about that, please look it up, right? There's this inherent vilification, villainizing, whatever the word is, a villain of Angel Reese, when she's just being herself and being who she is, coming from, I think she's from Baltimore, right? And so anyways, that's a frustration of mine. So instead of us debating if somebody's clothing made them deserving of sexual assault, we can have conversations about how pervasive rape culture is and how consent is a necessary component of any kind of engagement. So I think we can really utilize our media. We can really utilize technology to tell affirming stories. We don't have to succumb to legacy media. We don't have to succumb to these people who are really part of elite classes and elite audiences that don't really have the everyday person's interest in mind. And we can make sure that we're using these platforms that have large reaches to elevate some of these conversations that we know we're having at dinner tables and we know we're having hush hush on the side. Make a national discourse about what we all know to be true and what some of our frustrations are.
Okay, so let's get Cicely in here. I'd like to hear more from you. I want to go a little bit deeper. We were talking about, the voting records and all that stuff. But let's talk about some specific policy areas. Are there particular areas where candidates may fall short on reproductive justice? If so, tell us about that. I know you're in Michigan and you're at a lot of state tables. Share some of your experiences and how we can hold them accountable.
I mean, I'd start with environmental policies. A lot of times when we think about reproductive justice, it's very abortion focused. But it's a national issue with folks having access to clean, affordable drinking water. No one should have to be in a position to drink water that is not clean or unsafe. No one's water should ever be shut off because they're not able to afford to pay their water bills. We can't do anything in life without water. Water is life. And so I feel like we're really falling short with understanding the environmental importance connected to our work, and really creating solutions, co-creating solutions that we can really take things to the next level. And we're doing some work with We the People of Detroit to really figure out, working together in coalition to really start to have some real surefire solutions, not just on a state level, but nationally. What could that really look like? Also, healthcare. We have elected officials and candidates that don't see reproductive health as healthcare. They don't see abortion as healthcare. That's a problem. And then the maternal mortality rates in this nation are just off the charts. Our moms are dying from pregnancy related causes, but most of them are preventable, right? Most of the time it's because of medical racism. And so we have to start to focus our attention on that aspect. And then postpartum care as well. We're dying after we have these babies. A lot of mamas are being forced back to work when we're not ready, when we're not healed, when we still need time to get our bodies and our minds and our spirits together before we're forced to go back out and make a living. And so all of those different things are issues that I feel like we're really falling short on, that we need to start to garner the attention and have these intentional conversations to create these solutions. And then when we talk about like accountability, Malcolm X says that we really have to become more politically mature. And we have to start to understand that these people work for us. We are the boss. The folks that we put in office, we put them there, right? And if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, then we need to use our vote to fire them and replace them with people that actually are moving the issues forward that we need. So that's really what I feel like we need to do in terms of reproductive justice, the environmental issue and the healthcare issue for sure.
Thanks. And Beulah, you're in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Any thoughts on that, where they're falling short in some of these policies?
I think the only thing I would add to what Cicely offered is really getting elected officials and candidates to understand the intersections of our lives. I am loving learning about policy, and somebody phrased policy basically saying that policy interacts with every aspect of our lives, right? And so like to me, there's a connection between environmental justice and education. Our babies cannot be learning if they're inhaling asbestos. There's a connection between the housing issue and mass incarceration. Like we just saw the Supreme Court decision. And so what I would stress is getting people to understand the compounded nature of the legislation that they're looking to advance or the conversation that they're having, and not having, Audre Lorde says we do not live single issue lives. So recognizing that it's compounded, and there's a conversation about accountability. I think that grassroots organizations in particular have a mandate to really work with people and provide political homes and ongoing political analysis, and be the kind of like lever or liaison that holds elected officials accountable. If someone is not vibing with what your people want, you don't have to go to every meeting. You don't have to answer every call. So I think there's very subtle ways that we can work to hold people accountable. But I think it's for naught if we don't have a foundation and have people power. And if we only look at like policy or access to an elected official as power, I think we do ourselves a grave disservice.
I agree. And it really, thank you for lifting up that Audre Lorde quote. I mean, that is really what we try to underscore in RJ, is that it's a multi-issue framework. That's what those Black women were saying 30 years ago. Like, how do you make one decision about this without considering all the other social, political, economic, all these other factors they're going to have an impact on my reproductive decision making. Brittany, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add. If not, we can shift over to if you've traveled across the country, are there states where you see them getting it right? Or are there states where we still have a little more work?
Well, for starters, I want to double click on some things that Cicely Ambula said that I think are so important. One, it was Black radical feminists that reminded us, or that taught us really, that the personal is political. And to paraphrase Ta-Nehisi Coates, I once heard him speak, and he said that racism is interested in me even when I'm not interested in it. And the same is true of politics, right? And I think it's so important that nuanced conversations like these are continuing to happen, because white supremacy culture wants us to look at everything like a binary, that it's either you're in or you're out, you do or you don't, you vote or you don't. The fact of the matter is it's vote and, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's organize and, right? It's show up and we thankfully as Black folks are adept at doing the both and instead of the either or that this Western culture wants to convince us is the only way forward. And that's absolutely necessary. We can least afford to divest from the systems that still dictate and govern our lives. That's not an option for us. And we cannot afford to not constantly be creating and recreating the spaces, communities, and institutions that we know we need that are for us, by us. So this is not necessarily a reproductive justice example, but when I look at the work of the Dream Defenders in Florida and across Broward County in Florida and Miami, they said, look, we want to give people an alternative to 911 because we know that when interactions with police increase between police and Black people, then we know that the propensity for harm increases, right? So if we can decrease the interactions, then we can decrease the harm. Well, they said, there are lots of ways that we can push this legally. There are ways that we could advocate and fight for the creation of a bill or a new government institution, or we could just go build it ourselves, right? So they literally created the alternative themselves. There's a different number you can call if you live in their jurisdiction, that folks that can come and help you if you've got an emergency, if you've got a medical emergency, right? And so I think that it's important that we are doing that both and. The Dream Defenders is not telling people that they shouldn't be pushing government systems, but they're also telling people while we're doing that, let's get creative amongst ourselves. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say to Cicely's point, it's something that I say all the time. Politicians are not gods. They are our employees. Okay. And every single opportunity that we take or create to let them hear our collective voices is a performance review. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I've worked in some places where there's a performance review every month, every quarter, and then you got the big performance review halfway through the year. You got the big performance review at the very end of the year to find out if you're going to get a raise or not, right? We have all been in these situations as employees. We've all worked somewhere where somebody was telling us, you're doing this well, you're not doing this well. I need to see improvement on this in 6 months, or we need to have a different conversation, right? There's no reason why the people who get paid by our tax dollars and who we hire and fire, to Cicely's point, shouldn't be getting that performance review at the city council meetings, at the school board meetings, through the rallies, through the calls, through the letters we write, through the petitions we send, and yes, at the ballot box. So if we are consistently thinking about approaching being citizens, not just voters, but approaching being citizens as being the boss, then it's incumbent upon us to create the culture, right? That's the community creativity, and the team, that's the elected officials, that get us towards our collective goals. And when we are thinking like that all the time, not just in a presidential election year, not just when there's a ballot box at play, when we are thinking like that all the time, then we can truly invest in and show up in our power, certainly as reproductive justice voters, but as reproductive justice citizens, as people who care about bodily autonomy and community care.
Thank you. And, that Dream Defenders actually absolutely is reproductive justice. It really centers on that third tenet about the right to raise your children in a safe and sustainable environment. People really don't get how critical that is and how broad that is. That touches on environmental justice, but it touches on interactions and, us being able to not face harm or be, concerned about excessive interactions with the police. I wanted to shift a little bit to more of the grassroots work that Beulah and Cicely are doing. Tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about the role that grassroots organizations play in shaping the reproductive landscapes in states. Whoever wants to go first, jump right in there.
Cicely, do you want to go first?
Cicely, you're on mute. And while she's on mute, Beulah, why don't you go ahead?
Gladly, Regina. So as I shared, I really do think that grassroots organizations hold the responsibility of engaging community to gain trust, of being trusted sources of information. Because Brittany, absolutely about people Googling, but I'm not trying to be shady. Some people don't know how to Google effectively, and they'll go at the very top.
You are not wrong.
Okay, they'll go at the top result and be like, well, AI said, right? So in addition to that critical thinking in one's own work, it's also important for people to have organizations and trusted people embedded within their communities that they can process it with. I think that helps sharpen our political analysis. I agree that white supremacy suggests that we only can exist in a binary. And so much of what I am learning as I get deeper into this work is that we contain multitudes. Reproductive justice is adamant that there are better worlds with an S out there for us. Capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy wants us to think that this is it and that we have to succumb to these horrible, horrible options, not even choices, because choices are things you want, options. So I think that grassroots organizations need to do a much better job of listening to our communities and really like aggregating the information that we're gathering. Because if you're a single person, I never forget when I got radicalized and like started entering the social justice movement, I learned that so many of us are conditioned to feel guilty and ashamed for the conditions that we're having to navigate. We did not create this, right? So people are led to believe you're poor because you're lazy, instead of you're poor because there's a billionaire somewhere hoarding wealth from you. And so I think that to Brittany's point about the personal being political, there are personal responsibilities, practices, and actions that we have to commit ourselves to staunchly, but that is not enough. We also have to look at our interpersonal relationships. Who else is going through what I'm going through? It's not just me, right? If it's them and them and them and them, and we share this one identity, but they differ here and they differ here, what else is there? And then we start looking at institutional power. And individuals alone cannot combat institutional powers. It takes institutions to combat institutions. So what I think grassroots organizations have to do a better job at is focusing on what you should be focusing. If your work is local, do the local work to the best of your ability. Don't try to be a national organization. You don't have the range of resources, right? If you're a state-based organization, don't just focus on the major cities. Who are the people in rural areas that the Black people that are being left aside, right? What about our Black immigrants, right? Like who's being forgotten in these mainstream conversations? And then lastly, working to build regional power as well. One of the top things that I learned last year working on the Issue 1 work in Ohio was the vast difference between Pennsylvania and Ohio. Side by side, culturally, very different. Pennsylvania is in the Northeast, Ohio is Midwest nice. And I learned about Midwest nice through and through. Won't go into detail. Okay, I don't want no angry comments, but I learned about it. So then I learned through that process that there is, again, this connective tissue when it comes to regions, that if grassroots organizations said, I focus on this state, y'all focus on this state, let's collaborate and share our political analysis and put pressure on our elected officials that way, that is a role that we need. So I think essentially like what we talked about earlier, a lot of people are looking for hope. And I believe there's an abundance of not only hope, but also action that is awaiting us. I really feel like it's imperative for grassroots organizations to recognize what our resources are, what our connections are, and pour into our people in the same way that grassroots organizations often extract from our people and monetize off of people's plight and suffering, but we don't do much to cater to that. So when Brittany was talking about mutual aid, right, community care, leadership development, I feel like we're responsible for cultivating the next generation of leaders so that we're not only critiquing our existing leaders, but also being active in creating this next generation.
Cicely, what role do you think grassroots organizations play in shaping the RJ landscape?
I mean, Beulah nailed it really. When it comes down to it, it's the relationships that we build in community. And the most effective way we believe at the Wisdom Institute is listening. You know, a lot of times we come into the community with these agendas, with what we think we believe is best for folks. But as we know in this work, you know, they're living the experience. They are the experts. We know what we need. And so to have a culture of deep listening, which is what we have at the Wisdom Institute, those stories, the stories that we share with one another, that's central to reproductive justice. That's why reproductive justice is. That's how it works. It's our stories, right? And so we have to create spaces where stories can be shared, where we're not judging each other, where we are really promoting folks to be authentic, to share who they are, to talk about their lives, to talk about what they need, because then we're the bridge, right? We have the relationship on the back end with the legislators that work for us, right? We have the language, but we're using those stories from the community to fuel this next, to forward the vision even of reproductive justice. I also think it's our role in grassroots is to create decolonized theories and practices, and that we plan and strategize to realize reproductive justice. You know, it's real easy sometimes to go and create some Canva graphics and throw things out there and throw an event. But when we're really talking about deep relationships, that takes time. And we have to start approaching it that way for the long haul, not just these hit or misses. You know, we're gathering all these folks. We have this photo op. And sometimes the long haul is not sexy, right? Because it doesn't always look good. You might have 4 or 5 people there at a session. But it's that consistency, you know, that really grows the movement. And then also, I feel like grassroots organization, it's our responsibility to share with the community that their consciousness is what is creating our reality as well. Yeah, we've got all of these issues and situations that are coming at us that harm us, but we realize that we have power wherever we sit. And especially when we come together, there's nothing that we can't do. So we have to carry that hope and remind them of who we are, remind us of who we are as we forward things.
Yeah, Brittany, I know you cut your teeth in organizing. Anything else you want to add here?
I do, to this point of the long haul, the beauty about consistent, grounded, rooted, and connected organizing is that it enables us to build teams and not saviors. I think one of the most abundant pieces of miseducation that we've really done for the entire country, but especially in our community, is that we've made our movements about 1 or 2 people, right? Those 1 or 2 people are usually straight, cis men. Those 1 or 2 people usually hold some particular named position of authority in the community, right? They're a preacher or they're a head of a nationally known organization. And I have known plenty of folks like that who are doing good and important work. And the truth of the matter is none of our movements have ever moved with a single savior. They've always moved because of entire teams. The beauty of teamwork is that we can tap in and tap out as necessary, right? So the true fact that we are always dealing with and thinking about people's material needs and circumstances first, how we meet them, how we give people space to navigate them. That is part of why building teams is necessary. That if you are navigating the very thing that you're fighting, you always have to be at the forefront of that fighting line, that we're not actually enabling and empowering you to do more than survive, right? And so I think that organizing is critical in the way that it actually builds teams. And I think that one of the things that has been major about this latest chapter of organizing over the last 10, 15 years is that people are remembering to reject the idea of saviorism, right? To embrace community, to embrace teams, to embrace mutual learning and development and accountability, right? That we are working through the hard things of when, there is a fissure in the group, right? Or in the community, or there has been some kind of offense, right? How we actually deal with that in ways that love and honor one another and that move us forward together, right? That those kinds of approaches are, that's also the unsexy work, Cicely, right? Nobody really wants to dig into those weeds because it's ugly and confusing and hard. And yet that's the stuff that we have to do, right? And so I would co-sign all of the things that have been said and just add the fact that when we organize well and consistently, we enable the kinds of communities and teams such that we can practice the world that we want to build while we're building it.
Thanks so much. We're ready to move into the question and answer part of our show. While we're taking questions, I just want to give a shout out to folks too. If you like this hat, chat us a question and we'll send you one of these hats. These are hot off the press, and we want people to know that I'm an RJ voters. And I want you to wear this proud. So send us a question, DM us, tag us, and we'll send you a hat. While we're waiting for those questions to come in, two things I want to ask you. And so let me start with, a lot of times people think when you engage in this work, you have to be like a person of influence. You've had to have like this long history. It can be intimidating to do this work. Tell us, share how you got into it, or even like your story, or any recommendations for people to do this work. I'd like to start there because I want to just dispel that, there's not all these qualifications you have to champion RJ.
Can I jump in? Because really,
Yes.
That question just resonated so deeply. I literally came into this work. I just had my son, who's now 6 years old. And I was home. I had quit my job because, I wanted to breastfeed and I didn't have a conducive situation at the place I was at to do that. So I was home, and yes, mothering is a beautiful thing. It's a lot. It's a role that just takes you and grows you. It's important, right? But then it was also the side of me, the woman, that also needed to do something else to realize another aspect of myself. So one of my girlfriends came over, Reverend Nicole Miller. I'll never forget. She came to my house. She put a flyer on my dining room table. She was like, "You need to come be a mentor. Come to the Listening Partners." And she kind of explained to me what it was. And I just thought about it because I wasn't doing anything. I had literally asked Spirit to use me. So I said, okay, I'm going to go and see what this is about. And I pulled up. There was this little house in Detroit on Burwood. I'll never forget. I walked in. It was nothing but Black women, all different ages, from all different walks of life. And Gwen Winston, our founder and previous executive director, she just talked about the importance of listening, right? Not just to each other, but listening to ourselves, listening to that voice within, listening when something says it ain't right, knowing it's not right, but also acting on that, right? And how we have the opportunity with one another and the relationships that we hold with one another to really create change. And so I went to Art of Listening training, which we still have to this day. We train women in the art of listening, which is all about being present for one another and also using listening to advocate. And it just sucked me in. I started off literally as a volunteer. And then I looked up and I was managing a program. Then I looked up and I'm directing. And then it just went on and on and on. Do I feel like I'm an expert to any degree except to my own lived experience? Not necessarily, but I'm open to learning. Like, I can't tell you how much I've learned just sharing space with you all today, and understanding what's possible as I develop in my leadership, and then being sure to bring others into this work with me and developing them where they are. You can start right where you are. You don't have to know all of the things, but just showing up, showing up for yourself and showing up for us is the first step.
Beulah, and then we'll go to Brittany to round us out.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Regina and Cicely. Thank you for sharing your story as well. Also want to give a shout out to Jada Thompson. She's our integrated voter engagement coordinator in Pennsylvania, because oftentimes EDs get to be on panels like this, and like the people that are doing the work and making it possible for us don't get these kind of opportunities. We have often alluded to the unsexy work, and I just want to ask the question, what makes it unsexy, right? what makes it unsexy is it's not work that is awarded by this society, by this system. It's unsexy because you're not getting the money. You're not getting the accolades. You're not getting the praise, right? But I think about the grandmothers in the neighborhoods that I was growing up that always made a way despite not having resources, despite not having X, Y, or Z. So like, I feel like Black people, Black women in particular, Black queer people make miracles happen all the time. And I'm thinking about what Brittany said about creating heroes. Heroes make movements containable because all you have to do is cut off the head. Ella Baker said, give people the light and they'll find the way, right? One of my favorite quotes is the role of the artist is to make the movement irresistible, Tony Kate Bambara. So it's just like, we don't need a title. We don't need eloquence, because I could really talk forever about eloquence and articulation. If you're moved, if you gravitate towards something, if something bothers you and it's bothered you one too many times, then you're someone who can actively participate in reproductive justice. The reason I oftentimes talk about my coaching experience is because coaching is what pissed me off. Dealing with Black girls that are like, Coach B, you're the first person in my life who's ever taught me about my potential and held me accountable to that. My coaching was strengthened because of my understanding of reproductive justice and knowing what my babies deserve versus what their school administration was telling them that they deserve. So I take great pride in being a practitioner, which is why I'm always like, not necessarily break this down or dumb it down. Our people are not dumb, but how do we have language that's accessible? How do we get the beauty salon owner to understand that you're doing reproductive justice work when you have a client that has a bruise and you know to make adjustments because you know what happened last night because she has that bruise? How do we get people to understand you don't have to be an elected official? You don't have to read all this political theory, because the political theory is about the stuff that you're doing. So I really want to stress to people, to the everyday person, there is something so extraordinary about what you can bring to our movement. And I think that grassroots organizations can do a better job of creating pathways for people, because right now, a lot of people can only enter our movements through a job. So we need to be intentional about building political homes, offering membership, offering volunteer infrastructures, so that we're able to not just engage in moments, but contribute meaningfully to a movement and something that we equally all have part in, and not just like all hail this person who's been put up on this stage for us to kind of like listen to and serve as our movement God.
Brittany, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, so much brilliance has been shared. I do really think re-emphasizing, as Cicely has already done, starting where you are. The first thing I ever organized in my life was a protest of my friends and family and my dad's church members to get a Black Santa in our mall. That I was like 9, 10. This is what I cared about, right? And so what is true is that in that time, I learned two things. One is that if I'm passionate about something, I can organize people around it, right? Just that basic understanding for a child is life-changing. And two, I can win because we got the Black Santa, right? So like actually getting the goal had an impact on me that was that like forever transformed my life, right? And so it sounds silly now as a nearly 40-year-old, but those two lessons have colored everything I've done since. So if you're organizing around the stop sign or the speed bump that needs to come because people fly through your street too fast and that's dangerous for the children who are playing, if you are organizing, you know, around your social security office being open for extra hours, or the kidney dialysis office being open for extra hours because it's hard for people, for working people to actually be able to access the services that they need, whatever it is that you are passionate about, when we say begin where you are, we really mean start where you are. And I do believe that there's so much power for everybody right at that intersection of what they're passionate about and the skills that they've been honing over their life. I like to remind people that like we've created the title influencer because we've created an economy around being an influencer. But everybody is an influencer. Everyone has influence, right? If you are raising children, you have influence. If you are supporting grandchildren, you have influence. If you talk to your neighbors, you have influence. If you talk to the cashier at the grocery store, you have influence. If you are the cashier at the grocery store, you have influence. And we should be thinking creatively about how we use all those opportunities to influence. If you're the neighborhood candy lady, then tape a message or a website or an opportunity around the stem of that lollipop, right? If you do hair or makeup, right, there's no reason why you can't have literature available in your shop for whatever you know your clients are interested in, right? If you are teaching Sunday school, right, them books that they were banning at in your local school district, make sure you read them when you're teaching Sunday school. There is something a good friend of mine, Savannah Ellen Rogers, always says, is that before we had institutions, we were each other's institutions. That for so many of us, we were the schools where we learned to read and write. We were the places where we gained confidence. We were the coaches of the teams where we actually learned to see our potential and be held accountable to it, like Beulah has done, right? So we always should be showing up as institutions for each other, not to save anybody, but to show up where our skills and our passions intersect to be a part of something bigger. I'll close by this. I always love to tell the story that in Ferguson, when we say everybody had a role, we meant it very literally. That there were days when folks who got fired for their protest activity, the only meal that they would be getting would be out at the protest because Mama Cat's passion and skills intersected at the place of not only feeding people, but then educating people how to feed themselves, right? Taking formerly incarcerated people and houseless people and making sure that they develop those skills, right? So like Mama Cat was feeding people and teaching people right out there in front of the Ferguson Police Department. And sometimes that was the only meal people had. There was one night of protest that was one of the most creative things I'd ever seen. There was a chant that we always said, they think it's a game, they think it's a joke, because we'd be standing in front of police officers and they'd be laughing at us. So we would start chanting that. And my dear friend Kayla Reed, who's a brilliant organizer and who was a part-time pharmacy tech and a furniture salesperson before she really found her calling in organizing, and now runs an organization called Action St. Louis. She had the idea, and it was like one of those cartoon moments where you see the light bulb go off on top of somebody's head. We were standing at the intersection of Shaw and Clem. She goes, they think it's a game, they think it's a joke. And she kept repeating it to herself. And I saw the light bulb moment. And she realized that in and of itself was an action. So she sent everybody off to their houses or to the store or wherever to grab whatever games they had, outdoor games they had at home. If they had kickballs, if they had footballs to toss, if they had baseballs and mitts, if they had sidewalk chalk, jacks, if they had jump ropes for double dutch, everybody brought them at the appointed time. And what happened was that people literally played games in the street, and it was a street shutdown. Hear me clearly. It was a protest that shut down business as usual on a major thoroughfare on the south side of St. Louis that confounded the police because they wanted to be violent toward us, right? But they understood what Bull Connor had to learn, that if you are violent toward people who are showing up in joy, you're the one who looks like the bully, which you actually are, right? But they wanted better PR than that, right? So they couldn't do much about it. And it brought together a cross-section of people that we had never seen on the street before. There are Black teenagers teaching Jewish grandmothers how to double dutch, and they're engaging in a street shutdown at the same time, right? So like when we talk about everybody, all that woman did is come down her stoop and learn how to play double dutch, but she was engaging in radical action. So when we say everybody has a role and we can get creative about how we engage in those roles, we really mean it. And I'm excited to see how people do that.
Wow. You couldn't have said it any better. We are coming up on our time. So there is one question I want to kick to Beulah. So Beulah, if you could answer this question, then tell us how to find you, your organization, support you. Then we'll go to Cicely and then Brittany to tell the same. But someone asked about engaging the younger voters, 18 to 25. What are 3 steps for initial engagement? What would those steps look like? And if you've had any experience with this, like just what are your lessons learned?
Yeah, it's so interesting when I get questions about young people, because I used to be a young people and now I'm like, nah. So I'm like, what, me? But yeah, I think there's really been a through line through our conversation about listening. And I think that young people are naturally like figuring out what they like, what they don't like. So there's this sense of rebellion that is generated. And oftentimes it comes through in various ways that are like actually can be seen as destructive or like destructive, not destructive. And so what I think is really important is being an organization or a person that listens to young people, but doesn't only listen, can also offer action. When I was coaching my teams, I coached high school basketball, and we did a lot of great things. And I was like getting like really loving Blackness and Black people. My kids could sense that. I had people that would say your players would run through a wall for you, and I would say, and I would run through a wall for them. So when I think about what young people are up against and the world that they are inheriting, I get frustrated with them, and I think they're used to engaging adults that don't take them seriously for the same reason that a number of marginalized communities are not taken seriously. So I just want to offer that, like, it's important to listen, but it's equally, if not more important, to follow through with action that shows them that I'm taking you seriously, because, you know, young people have energy, they have ideas, like they're more invested in our future than some of us are. So that's what I'll offer there, because I know we're running on time. The way to find us, our website is newvoicesrj.org. And our handle is pretty consistent across all of our platforms. So TikTok, Instagram, anything that exists social media wise, we're probably on there. So that's the best way to find us.
Cicely, what ways do you promote your organization's work in your community, and how can we find you?
Ways that we promote the work.
Yeah, and to get support, and how can we find you to support you more?
Oh, well, we do have a website, wisdominstitutedetroit.org. It's the same on Facebook, wisdominstitutedetroit.org, and Instagram as well. We just kind of recently kind of got all of this, our platforms together. So please check us out. And then in terms of, are we still talking about like young people?
No, just people in your community. What ways are you getting them to support your organization and your work?
Oh my gosh. Mainly pulling folks in to let them know that there's nothing wrong with you. Come in, be yourself. You know, you can work with us. We want to work with you. We want to listen, to learn about the issues that you're dealing with. We want to connect with you on a deeper level and build that relationship so that we can build power together. So we're doing, you know, our listening partners program is ramping back up. We do mentor mentee matchup. We also hold listening circles on a monthly basis that's open to the community. Sometimes they've been virtual in the past, but most of the work we'll be doing is in person. And then we're doing a listening tour as well. So we're visiting with lawmakers, organizations, you know, all in preparation for a Capitol Day in Lansing. And we'd love for you all to connect with us. And then also, we recently just had our Womb Liberation Festival, where we celebrate womb-centered consciousness, which we understand is a portal of connectivity and connection to realize reproductive justice. We have that every Juneteenth. You know, we're trying to do it even bigger and bigger every single year, to just include anybody that wants to join in this important work with us.
All right. So follow us and for more information. Brittany, before you tell us where to find us out, let's end where we started. We talked about the candidacy and the impact, how it was going to allow us to pivot to RJ issues. How do you think the transition in the candidacy will benefit Black women?
You know what? I'm going to pivot on your question just a little bit, because even more than the transition in the candidacy, I want us to talk about our transition, right? We've seen a burst of engagement, of fundraising from small dollar donors. We've seen an explosion of enthusiasm and curiosity and excitement. I want us to engage in that way, expanded beyond a single candidate or a single election or a single party. The transition that I have seen that is so beautiful is that we are stopping people from asking each other out loud often if America is ready. Is America ready to elect a Black woman? Is America ready for the kind of world we want to create? Is America ready to restore Roe versus Wade? Is America ready to stop all that? When we're ready, we get America ready. There are plenty of things America was not ready for, but we decided that we were ready for them, and we stopped at nothing to make them happen. I guarantee you America was not ready to integrate those schools, but the folks fought and the folks won, right? I guarantee you America was not ready for a movement around racial justice and against police violence to take over the entire globe. But guess what? We put our boots to the ground and the entire globe followed, right? So there is a power that I want us to always own, and to recognize that we get to tell people to stop asking if America is ready, if other people are ready, if we are ready, we get it done. And so that's what I hope to leave you all with. Obviously, we've got incredible examples of getting it done right here on this call. And I'm excited to continue to engage and support you all's work. You can find me at Ms. Packyetti on all social media. I haven't run an organization in a little while, and it's been, you're off of social media, Beulah, and I'm out of the executive director seat. So we're both experiencing relief on both ends. But I'm at Ms. Packyetti on all social media. That is the nickname that my third grade students gave me. And you can find Undistracted wherever you get your podcasts.
Of course, tune into that third season. And I'm going to take that last question about birth workers, how we elevate the idea. So a core component of reproductive justice is that birth justice, right? Which is the right, you can make decisions about your pregnancy, your health decisions before, during, and after. And so when we expand that, we're not just talking about doulas. We're not just talking about birth midwifery. We're talking about things like having your birth plan respected, not, being able to have access to breastfeeding, all of those things that encompass that experience so that that baby can be healthy and can go on to thrive in those communities. I want to thank this incredible panelists. I am so pumped. I hope you guys are pumped. I hope this was a great way to spend your morning and your lunch. So many pearls. Thank you for sharing your insights and expertise today. As we draw this discussion to a close, I want to take a moment to emphasize the critical importance of your roles as informed and engaged voters and citizens. If you didn't feel that today, I hope I don't know what to tell you, because the power to drive meaningful change in our communities and across our nation lies in our hands. No one's coming to save us. And it's not just now, it's in beyond. It's not just this election, it's, for decades to come. What is going to happen now is going to have an impact on our joy and our livelihood and our safety for decades. So we've got to be able to stay vigilant, stay informed, and exercise our power. Progress through civic engagement does not start and end with an election. First, let me, we're running on time. So, if you want to know what to do next, vote. Let's make a voting plan. It's not simple, not just, I know you intend to vote, but we need to be deliberate and proactive about it. So think about your schedule, your transportation, any of the factors that might affect your ability to cast your vote, and anticipate that there might be, because you know what? They want to take the vote. And I ask you, why would they be working so hard to take it away from you if it wasn't important? And remember, if you don't vote, you kind of already voted. So we need you all, please turn out. When you decide whether, maybe you want to do early voting, maybe you want to do mail-in, make sure you have all the information, make sure you know about the deadlines. After you've made your plan, share it with your community, talk to your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, drive them there, knock on the door, ask them, did they vote, take them there, encourage them to make their own voting plans, offer assistance. Our collective action is going to have a ripple effect. And so we've got to make sure everyone turns out. We want to keep this momentum going. We've talked about this excitement. Let's do our part. The other thing I would just say is, if you want to find more about more of our work, visit imanrjvoter.org. We've got toolkits on there. We give suggestions for how you can engage in your own events. And remember, the power lies with us. I'll end with how I, talked about next week marks the 30th anniversary of reproductive justice. Those 12 women came together wanting to fight for more. And so this is not just a moment for us to reflect on the progress we've made. It is now a global movement, but now it's also a call to action to continue the fight for justice and equality. It's about the human rights. It's about all these other things that we should be entitled to by virtue of being born. So join us in celebrating this milestone. Join us in recommitting ourselves to advance reproductive justice. You want to know more about In Our Own Voice? Follow us across all our socials at Black Women's RJ. Stay updated on our journeys. We just came from NAACP. We're hitting up all kinds of events this summer. Come meet us, come talk to us, come join us. Together we can amplify our voices, ensure our rights are protected for generations to come. Thank you again to all of our panelists. Thank you all for participating, and thank you for your dedication. Stay connected with the In Our Own Voice for updates, and have a great day. Together we can create a brighter, more prosperous future for everyone.
And if I am your average voter and you're not talking to me about my daily issues, about the food that comes into my community that is of a different quality than your community, or if you're not talking about the price of gas, or that I'm paying 3/4 of my monthly income for rent or the mortgage, and that I'm making less money. As a Black woman, we make less money even doing more work. So if we're not talking about those issues and weaving them into a reproductive justice conversation, then we're really not having a reproductive justice conversation. We might be having a reproductive health or rights conversation. So that's why it came up. I want to go back to one of the first polls that In Our Own Voice did, came back and said that water was a concerning issue. This was before water became a popular issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and getting the voices and the concerns of those who are closest to the issue and the problem really dictate the solution. And if the poll says that we are concerned about inflation, about the economy, better believe that there are other folks who are concerned about that also, but that is the real issue we need to address.